Hello everyone, my name is Adekola Israel. So today I'll be taking you guys out to map array in React. So the way array is treated in React is quite different from vanilla JavaScript, and it's a little bit more complex. So today we'll cover how to add to an array to the front and back, how to edit, how to delete, how to add to the middle, and how to filter an array. So let's start. So basically, I'll make use of useState variable. So a useState variable is one of React hooks. So it's a variable that provides easy usage and accessibility for rendering. So basically, what this does is that if you have a useState variable, instead of you updating the UI like we used to do in normal vanilla JavaScript that would do dot inner HTML dot inner text, with useState variable you don't have to do that. It will undo everything by you rendering to the HTML document. So let's start. So how do we make use of useState variable? So this is an example of how you can use a useState variable. So it starts with the variable type, which is a const, followed by the variable name, which is list, and then the function that triggers the variable or changes the variable, which is setList, followed by the useState, then the initial state. So for example, now I can have a variable called const name, comma. So this name means the name of the variable. So if you think of this just like we used to write in normal vanilla JavaScript, we will have const name, then we'll write the initial value directly. But for useState, you have to pass in two dependencies, the variable name and then the function to update the variable. So the second one is the function you will use to update the variable. You can make use of any name you want, but by convention you make use of set the variable name you used. So I can say set name, so followed by equal to, then the useState, you pass in the initial state. So your initial state can be anything, so probably like useState, and then let me say my initial state is Tilux. So this is basically how to create a useState variable, and then as we go on we will learn how to make use of it. So the first thing I would like to talk about is map. So what is map? Map is basically what we all know in JavaScript, right? They are used to maybe like either render or maybe like show the list in an array. And what I mean by list in an array is individual tag in an array. For example, now I can have this name to be an array, so maybe like Israel, maybe like Tilux. So this array has two values. It has Israel and Tilux. So if I want to map out this thing, maybe like treat them individually, we make use of map in JavaScript. So now let's start. And how do we use it in React? So for example, now I want to map this list array to my front end. So the best way to do it is to come to where you want to map it, and then you make use of this. So this is more like JSX function. So in React, this allows you to write JavaScript inside HTML rendering. So if you want to write JavaScript inside HTML rendering, you make use of the parentheses. So now how do we make use of map in React? So I can have list.map. So it's either I write it like this, or I use parentheses or curly braces. So this is parentheses now, and I can also make use of curly braces, but they are a little bit different, and I will tell you as we go on. Okay, so map takes in two parameters, which is the callback function and then the arguments. So this callback function is basically what you know in JavaScript. So they are using, maybe like if you want to write a function, maybe you want to get a return or a statement from a function, so you make use of callback function, and then these arguments are blocks of code you want to run. So for example, now in this callback function, it takes in three parameters, or maybe like gives you three outputs. So the first one is the output, which is more like the value of individual value in the array. So for example now, Israel is a value in the array, Tlox is also a value in the array. So if I want to get individual value in the array, I'll make this, I'll pass in my output, then I'll have the accessibility to my outputs in the array. So the second one is the index. So for example now, if I should log my outputs, let's see what we'll have in our console. Okay. So we have this in our console now. We have individual value in the variable of list. So this is for list. So if I should change this to maybe like name, I want to map out to name now. So I have Israel and Tlox. So the second one is the index. So what I mean by the index is that the number assigned to each value in the array. So the first one is Israel. So Israel starts from like array starts from the index of 0, so which means it starts counting from 0. So Israel is index of 0, Tlox is index of 1, and then if you have so many values like that, then you have 0, 1, 2, 3 to other numbers. So for example now, if I want to get individual index for each of these, so I will pass in the second one, which is the index. So if I should consider log output comma index now, so it should give me the output comma their index. So Israel is at index of 0 and Tlox is at index of 1. So third one is followed by the third parameter for this callback function is called the array. So this array returns the whole array for you. So for example now, if I want to get back the whole array, I'll just call on the array, maybe like console.log the array, then I will have all the whole array. So that's how it is. So for example now, so as we have this, talking about function and then how you can write your mapping in React. So I told you guys that you can either make use of parentheses or curly braces. So making use of curly braces allows you to write more JavaScript. Maybe like you can write your if statements, or maybe like your for loop, any loop, or anything you want to do before you render. So for example now, if I want to write this and then I want to return back my JSX, I'll write my condition, I'll write any JavaScript I want inside here. Then after I'm done, I'll just write the return statement, then pass in my parentheses. So inside your parentheses, it expects a JSX. Then here you can write your HTML rendering, maybe like div or maybe like p tag or any element you want to write. So the second one is making use of parentheses directly. So if you make use of parentheses directly, this does not allows you to write any JavaScript or any condition anymore. So if you make use of parentheses, the only thing it needs from you directly is JSX. So which means you can only write your HTML here without any JavaScript anymore. So this varies based on what you want to do in particular. So for example, if you need to maybe like write some function to check for some condition before rendering, or you just want to maybe like map the results out immediately you want. So for example now, I can have my div directly here. So I can have my div and say hello. So if I come back here, I should see hello for 2. So which means I'm mapping out hello for the 2 values in the array. So for example now, let's take for example, if I want to write a function, and let's make use of the list variable. So the list variable contains array of objects, and I want to write a condition whereby I will say the list, it should only render an object that has the color of maybe like light blue or something. So for example now, I will make use of my curly braces, then I'll write my function, then after that I will render it. So let's say I have maybe like if output dot the color. If I want to select the color now, so the color is equal to maybe like alias blue. So I'm trying to give it a strict rule that it is only when the output is equal to alias blue, that's when you should map out this array. So if I want to map it now, I'll make use of my return statements, right? So I'll have my div, and then I'll have my output, and then the output is, so I'll make use of this. So this is called interpolation. Interpolation means whether you want to write a JavaScript variable inside HTML tag. So now if I want to display my output dot text, so dot text, now I'll write output dot text here. So I have hello world 2 and hello world 3, and then if you check very well, hello world 1, okay, here I have the color is alias blue, and then this is hello world 2. This color for this one is blue, so, and then the text is hello world 2. So basically it will only check for this because the color for this one is alias blue, but for this one it is blue. And if you check the third one, it says orange, so it will neglect this. The fourth one says alias blue, so it basically picked this and then the first one. So that's how you can filter a mapping. So secondly, making use of the parentheses. Okay, so if I want to map everything out without me writing any condition, or maybe without me performing any operation on them, so I can have my parentheses directly, then I'll write everything I want to write directly. So I can have output now, output dot text. So easily you can map out every individual value in the array. So depending on what you want to do, it depends on what you want to do, that you will choose. Maybe you want to make use of a parenthesis or curly braces. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how we can add to the front and back of an array. So for example, now we would like to maybe like create a useState variable, then bind it to an input element. So I created an input for adding it to do, and then I created another input for editing it to do. So for example, now I can bind, there's something called binding in JavaScript frameworks. So binding means you're trying to maybe like connect a variable with an with HTML input. So which means anything that is inside a variable will be inside that HTML input, and whenever the input changes, it updates the variable also. So for example, now I can have a variable const to do name, comma set to do name. So I can give it a useState of maybe like hello world. So if I write this variable like this, and I want to bind it to an HTML input, I'll just come to my input, and then I can assign a value to it. So for example, you know, every input takes a value. The value is more like their what is inside them originally, or what they contain. So for example, now if I should bind the value of to do to this input, I'll just write the name of to do name. So anything that's inside to do name will automatically show inside inputs. So for example, now I have hello world by default. So anything I write here will show in my HTML input. So which means I've binded the HTML input with this variable name of to do name. So now I can set this to be an empty string, but the problem is updating the input. So the way React works is that if you want to get an input element, because React and other frameworks, they were made because making use of input dot value and stuffs are not secured enough, and then they made use of binding to collect inputs and other stuffs from HTML elements. So if you want to make changes to this input, that whenever you type something, it will show in your variable. So for example, now I've binded this to be to do name, and then the only way this value of this input can change is only when this value changes. So if I want to change it now, so there is something called onChange event handler in JavaScript. OnChange event handler, so we call it change in normal JavaScript. So but for React, every event listener has on as prefix. So there is onChange. You can use so many event listener for input, maybe like on blur or on inputs. There are so many things. You can even use an input for what you want to do actually, and then both works the same way, just that they have little changes in them. So onChange now, what I mean by onChange event handler is that whenever the input changes, it will trigger this function that I write inside my onChange. So for example, now I can say whenever the input changes, I want it to console.log input as change, and you can see here I have dot value, so which means the current value for this element is empty. So let me try to type something now, and let's see what we have. So we have the value here also, but it is not changing. So the problem now is that this current input is binded to this variable name, and then the only way the value can change is when you change the variable. So the only thing we can do now is maybe like, so if I should try to maybe like log the event.target.value, so me trying to maybe like locate this whole event, right? This whole event, then we have .target and then .value. So if I should log e.target.value, I will get each keystroke that I enter inside the HTML. So but normally it's supposed to maybe like add to the HTML value, but the value of that input is binded to this variable name. So until when the variable name changes, that is when it will only change. So I have this now to be fr, fggg, and so many things. So if I want to set my variable now, all I will have to do is use set to do name to be what? To be my e.target.value, and let's see what we have. So we have all the events, all the keystroke being imputed in our elements. So basically what we are trying to do is that every event, every keystroke that we got from here now, and we are setting them to be this variable name. So it's not as if we are trying to change the inputs, but we are trying to change the variable directly. So we are trying to make changes to the variable so that it will reflect on the inputs. So if I should set to do name, as you know, this changes the value of this variable. So I'm not saying the function that changes the values of this variable now should take in the value of event.target.value, and as I told you earlier, you can locate it using the event handler. So now we've gotten a way to get our to do name successfully in a variable. So anytime we need to call to get our to do name, all we just have to do is call this variable, and then we'll have the access to the name of the to do. So we have this now, and then we can also create another variable to bind to the inputs of the input type color. So I can say color, set color. So you can bind this to be an empty string also, and all I just have to do, following the same pattern, I'll come to this input type color, give it a value of color, and then I'll put in the onChange event handler. So every time it changes, it should pass in the parameter of event. So let me write a function that works for this. So let's say const change color to be equal to the event. So I can say set color to be what? My e.target.value. So the event that I got here is to check the target, then it will to check the value. Anything it sees inside the dot value, it will make it as the variable for color. So passing my onChange handler, I can pass in the function name, which is change color, and then pass in my event. So for example now, if I should click on this color now, okay, let us try to log the color and see what we have. e.target.value. So now if I should click on this, I have the color code of the current color that I selected. So now we've successfully binded our input to a variable, and anytime we need those inputs, we just call on the variable name directly. So now we want to add to-do list, and then this is when it comes to adding to the array. So how do you add to an array? I can just pass another event handler from here. So let me call it maybe like, I'll call on click, and then the event that identifier is add to do. So I'll write my function of const add to do, and since I'm not passing any parameter, so the thing is, we want to make use of the to do name and the to do color. So for example now, I can have a name of, okay, I'll just log to do name, comma the color, and let's see what we have in our console. So for example now, if I should write hello Amtilox, and then if I should select the color I want, maybe like to blue or something, if I should click on add to do, I have hello Amtilox and then the color code. So this makes work easier for us to do. So and then the next thing to do now is to add it to our current array list. So now if we check the object that I used, we realize that I made use of something ID, and then ID must be maybe like something unique or something very different from others. So you can use any method you want to generate your ID. So for example, you can make use of for loop. So making use of for loop, you can say const all numbers. So let's try a method now. Let's say numbers to be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 0. So these are numbers that can exist. So you can say let index be equal to 0. Your index is less than 11. Let's say we want to generate 11 different things. So index plus plus. I'm very sure we are very familiar with for loop, and then we'll just use this to generate ID automatically. So for example now, I'll make use of random. So we all know random. So for example now, I can say const random number to be equal to what, maths dot random, to by maths dot random. So if I should say maths dot random, let's see what we'll get before we run our for loop. So now let's try to log random number and see what we'll have. So if I should click on this, I got a random number of 0.872 something. If I should click on it again, I'll get different kind of numbers. So here now, random works for generating random numbers, and then you can give it maybe like a value of, I want it to be maybe like up to highest of maybe like 11 digits. So I can put 11 here, and then it will generate numbers from me within the range of 1 to 11. So also I can bind anything I want. So but the problem is that it is generating decimal numbers, and how do I convert decimal numbers back to whole number? So here we'll make use of math.floor. So math.floor rounds up a decimal number, and what I mean by rounds up is that if it is 0.5 and above, it will automatically turn it to 1. So for example now, I can have math.floor and then passing my math.random. Okay, random, so multiply by 9, so which means it generates numerical value, but the highest it will be is 9. So I can actually even cut this away. I don't really need this. So now let's try to log random number and see what we have. So if I should click on this, I have 5, I have 3, I have 2, I have 4, and I have so many digits, but the highest it could be is 9. So now that we've got this, we'll find a way to maybe like make it generate random number 11 times and then store it in a particular variable. So now let's say I have a variable called maybe like let odd random number to be an empty string. So if I should call this and then I use my for loop to run the random 11 times, so by the time it runs 11 times, I'll just save all the values that I got in a particular variable. So now let's say I have this, I'll just copy this now, Ctrl C, and then put it here, and then let me try to log it also. Okay, so let me log all the values that we've got. So since we are using for loop, it will run the math.random 11 times because we said index less than or 11, so which means it will run it 11 times before it stops. So now let's say we click on this, so we have different 11 numbers. We have 3, 2, 8, 7, 6, and so many till it's got to 11 digits. So since we've got this, we'll find a way to maybe like bind everything inside one variable. So and then we can mix of, say, our old number to be plus equal to a random number. So what this means is that assuming my initial value of odd number is 1, so whenever it generates another random number, instead of replacing the 1, it will add that random number to the back of the 1. So let's say the next generated number is 3, so instead of replacing 1 by 3, it will add 3 to 1, so it will become 1 3. Then another one to generate another one again, maybe like 1 3 6, and then it will keep adding until the for loop stops. So now let's say if I should do random number plus equal to random plus equal to odd random number plus equal to random number, so which means every digit I get from random number will be added plus the initial value of odd random number. So if I should try to log odd random number and then see what I have, I will have, first of all, it has 8, then it's got 5, then it's added 5, 852 till it's got to 11 digits. So with this, we found a way to maybe like generate our ID dynamically, right? So I will just say, after running the for loop now, you can say const ID to be equal to what? To be equal to my old number. So we found a way to generate the 11 digits using for loop. So now we want to add the list we want to add to the to-do list that we have already. So how do we add to the front of an array? So for example, now, if we have to change anything pertaining to this list, we have to make use of set list to change the variable value. So I'll call on set list, and then what do I want to change the value to? So basically I can change the value to anything I want. Maybe like I can even say set list to be tlox, and then the whole array will become tlox. And then definitely it will crash. So now let's say I want to maybe like push it to the back of an array now. So there's this callback in React for a useState variable, whereas you can get all the values inside a variable. So for example, now setList is a function that triggers the variable, right? So you can even get all the values that is inside a particular variable by passing the parameter. So for example, now I can make the parameter anything I want, maybe like list, or maybe like previous, or maybe like anything I want. But by convention, we make use of previous, prev to be short. So prev now, that means you are replacing or you are representing all the values inside set list. So definitely it means the values of list, everything inside list, you are representing it as previous. So if I should try to maybe like okay, if I should log previous here, let's see what we'll have. Let's see what we'll have if I should try to log previous. So I have 5 arrays So which means I've gotten a way to get all the values inside my list, representing them as previous. So now, but it crashed. The reason why it crashed is because setList is expects a return statement. So because the reason why we're making use of this function is to change the value, but we're using it to log, so definitely we are not returning any value to it. So by default it will become undefined or null. So now this is not the main purpose of why we want to use this. So we want to be able to add to the end of an array. So, and simply we've gotten a way to get all the values inside our set list. So for us to maybe like set it to the back of an array, we can't make use of array.push as we used to do in JavaScript. So the only thing we can do is collect all the array, then we'll add anything we want to add to the back. And what do I mean by this? I'll make use of the array, so which means I'm still setting it to be array, but I want to make use of spread operator. So this dot 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 means spread operator, and what I mean by spread operator is that it will extract all the values inside this array. So it will remove this particular array away, and then also at the back, and then it will return the whole thing, the remaining thing for you. That's how spread operator works. So spread operator is used for extracting out a value in an array or object. You can actually use it for objects also, whereas this particular object you can extract everything that is inside this particular object out using the spread operator. So now let's take, for example, now if I should say dot 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 spread previous, now let's say comma the another value that I want to add. So now let's say the ID to be what? The ID that I said. So basically you can even call the ID because it has the same name for value and then the property. So the property and value, the thing about objects is that if the property and value has the same variable name or maybe like the same name, you can just write it directly as that particular thing without you having to write ID to be colon ID anymore. So I can say ID or maybe like ID to be colon ID, so which means I'm setting this particular property to be this ID of variable name. So I can pass in my ID, also maybe like the color to maybe be, I've set the color also, so I can say color to be color and then comma the text to be what? To do name. So which means I'm extracting everything inside this previous now, which means I will not have anything called array anymore. I will have only the objects, all the values inside that array. So I'm trying to call everything now and put it inside here, comma. So if you notice that every value of an array is separated by comma, so basically what I'm trying to do is just copy this thing now, copy this thing and then come and put it at the back of this one and do comma. Still same thing. So that's basically how spread operator works. It will extract everything inside an array or an object. So now let's see if I should set previous of this and then let's see what we'll get. So let's say I input new input now and then I change the color to maybe like be this color, so I can add to my to do and then by default automatically I have the new inputs, the color, and then okay. So do you see the reason why useState is very essential in writing React? So useState helps you to manage the rendering without you having to do mapping again or maybe like doing the dots in HTML every time your input changes. So useState handles the rendering, which means it will update the user interface for you by itself. So now we can have so many inputs. Now we can have like this and change the color to anything we want and set add to do. So but another thing I noticed is that if we add to do, this is not becoming empty and then this is not returning back to its initial value. So if we want to change anything between these two, we'll just call on their variable name and then assign the value we want to it. So I can say after setting the list, I can come here and do set the to do name to be what? An empty string. So if I should type in anything and add to do now, the to do name will become an empty string automatically. And let's try to see, maybe we can set the color back to an empty, to the default color. So I can say set color back to an empty string, and then let's see what we have, and then it return back to the black. So do we see that? So now that we've gotten this, and then how do we add and edit an array? So I have two button, one is edit and one is delete, and then I can add a function to them that edits and deletes them. So since we've gotten a way to add to the front of an array, let's talk about how we can add to the back of an array. So this is more like same step of the way we used to, like the way we added to the back of an array. All we just have to do is copy your this thing, and then instead of adding it to the back, you can do this and comma the previous array, the previous object inside the array. So now if you should try to maybe like write anything, instead of adding it to the number 9, it will add it to the top. So if I should add it now, I'll have it at the top of my array. So that's how it works. Basically same thing. I don't have to use the shift or unshift to add to the front of an array. So how do I edit and delete an array? So for example, now I want to edit an array and delete it. In JavaScript, we make use of splice or slice or filter or anything you want to do. But if you want to do this in React, it is somehow different. Start editing and deleting an array. I would like to talk about filter, because basically we're going to use filter while editing and deleting. So the way we used to use filter in JavaScript is array.filter, then we'll filter anything we want to filter out. So it's the same thing in React, but a little bit different. So for example, now let me say I come here and do const filter list, a function name, right? So to be this, and then if I should write this function and then say these functions do what? It filters out an array. So how do I filter out an array? So now let's take, for example, I want to filter every color. I want to filter out every color that has the color of Eli's blue now. So all I just have to do is do normal in JavaScript. What we used to do is const filter array or something, then we'll do list, the list dot filter, and then we'll filter anything once. Then we can replace, you can represent anything coming in the filter by maybe like previous, or maybe like items, or anything we want. So which means I'm representing all the individuals value inside this variable list as items. So I can say items, and then I want to filter out where items dot color is equal to Eli's blue. So now let's say if a button triggers this filter list, let's say we are the button here now, button of filter Eli's blue. So and then I'll just pass in my onClick event handler. So if I should do onClick, then I call my variable name of filter list. So if I should click on this, and if I should go to my console and click on filter Eli's blue, so let me try to log what we get back from filter array now. So let's say I have filter array, so let me filter it now. I have only 2. So which means it has filtered everything apart from every object that does not have the color of Eli's blue. So it's only return the particular condition you give to it. So I'm just saying it is only when the items that color is equal to Eli's blue that is what you should return. So any object that does not have the color of Eli's blue will be filtered out. So basically this is how we do it in JavaScript, and then we can just say our filter array to be equal to list and then map it again. But in React, the way we do this is a little bit different, because as you can see, we found a way to maybe like filter everything, but it is not filter, it is not filtering. So now, and I cannot say list now, to be equal to list dot filter, because if you check here very well, this is a constant variable. And let's try it and see what we'll get. We got assignment to constant variable. So basically we cannot do it like that. So all we just have to do is, now for us to filter an array, we'll call that function that changes the list, which is what set list, right? So this is the function that changes the list, and all I have to do is pass in what, as we said there, that you can get all the values inside this list with what you represent it as. So for example, now I can represent it as previous as we did before, or maybe like you can use list, you can use any name you want. So now let's say I use previous. If I want to now filter, now I'll have to make use of that previous, because definitely all the items from this set list is represented by previous. So I can say previous dot filter everything I want to filter, and then it will return it back and update it in my UI. So if I should filter now, I have the array with the color of alias blue. So this actually helps a lot, whereby for example you have some things you want to filter out, maybe like your array should not be undefined or null, or maybe your array that contains this particular ID, or you want to check for a particular ID. So now let's take, for example, I want to look for the particular object that has this ID number. All I just have to do is do item.id is equal to what, this ID number. So if I should click on filter now, it will only filter and remain only the one that has that particular ID. So that's how filter works, and then this is how you can use it in React. So now that we've gotten a way to do this, how do we like edit and delete in an array in React? So for example, now I can write a function that edits and deletes now. So let's say I have const edit to be equal to a function. So I can pass in my parameter to maybe like the output that I got from the element that triggers this edit to do. So for example, now I'll just call on click, so which means every time I click on edit button, it should do what? It should trigger the function of edit to do. And the reason why I made use of this is that I want to pass in a particular parameters or something. And I told you that if you want to pass in a parameter in React, you have to make use of callback function, except it will render and then the app will crash. So if I make use of callback function now, and what I want to pass is my output, here we are getting the output now. So now let me say I pass in the output, and then I try to move like log the output here now, log output. So which means whenever I click on edit, I should get the output for the particular to do that I clicked on. So if I should click on edit again, I will have the objects for that particular to do. So we found a way to maybe like pass in what we want, but we can just maybe like simplify it and pass in only the ID, because we need the ID to track down what we want to edit or delete. So for example, now I can come here and do, instead of doing the output, I can do output.id. So for example, now if I should click on this, it will return back only the ID for me, and then I can change this for easy understanding back to ID. So which means I'm expecting ID from any function that calls, from any element that calls this function. So if I should click on edit, I have edit. So since we found a way to maybe like get our edit, and then we want to change the everything that's inside our edit, so how do we change it? So for example, now I want to maybe like, so if we want to do this normal, we'll make use of filter, right? So we can say const filter check, let's say check obj, so maybe like list dot filter, and then we'll have the previous. We can pass in anything we want. So we can say previous where previous dot id is equal to this current ID being passed as parameter. So now if I should try to log obj now, check obj, what do I get in my console? So if I should edit it, so I'm getting this particular object that has the ID, so to return it back in form of array for you. So whereas if there are more than 20 objects that has this particular ID, I can have everything inside my array, and then you can call on anyone you want, or you can make changes to every one of them. So since we've gotten a way to get our ID now, and we've gotten a way to track it down in our array, so we can basically maybe create a variable and bind it to this particular input, so we can show the text and then the color of this particular thing. So now let's say I have const edit name, set edit name to be useState of, so let's say we have empty string now, and then we have const edit color, set edit color to be equal to useState of an empty string. So as we said, we can bind this to our HTML inputs. So all we just have to do is follow the same pattern and say our current input now, the inputs for the text should now be, the value should be equal to what, edit name, and then we'll bind this also value to be equal to what, edit color. So everything we get here will be returned here. So for example, now if I have hello world as my edit name, I should see hello world in my inputs. So that's that on that. So now since we've gotten a way to do this, and then we found out that it is returning array for us instead of the particular object. So if we need that particular object now, all we can do is maybe say const the obj to be what, check obj at the index of 0, so it will return. So for example, now if I should click on edit and I check the array that it returns, the particular thing we need is at the index of 0, so I can call the check obj at index of 0, and then I will have direct access to what I actually need. So for example, now if I should log the obj now, let's see what I have. So I have the particular object, so then I can try to maybe do anything I want and say my edit name now. I can set my edit name to be what, the obj.text, right? And then I can set my color, set edit color to be obj.color. And now let's see what we have. So if I should edit this, I have hello world 2, and then the color. Okay, so if I should click on this, I will have access to all the color that I have. So it says orange does not conform to the required format. The format is RGB, so where RRGGBB are 2 digits hexadecimal. So the reason is because I tried to pass a simple or maybe a color format that is not acceptable by input type color. So by default it will select black as its color. So now that I have this, I can say okay, so I can pass in the event handler for this, and also I can say const edit id to save the edit id to be set edit id of useState of an empty string. So since we've gotten the ID here also, we can say set edit id to be the particular ID we got. So we can either use id directly or maybe the obj.id. So now that we've gotten this, we'll just come back here and put in the onChange handler that whenever this input changes, it changes the value of edit name. So I'll just pass in onChange event handler now, onChange, and then I can pass in a callback function with events. We have edit, okay, we have change edit name, then we can pass in our events. So I can copy the same thing also and paste it in my input type color and say this should be edit change color edit. So I'll call this function and then call on the function. Okay, so since I have this now and then I'll call on the second one, which is change color edits. Okay, so I have the two function that changes the edit name and then the color edit name. So here now I can have the events and then do the same way we do. We can just say set edit name to be what our event dot target dot the value of it. So I can come here also and do set color edit color to be event dot target dot value. So now if we should do this now, we'll be able to write our inputs and then we'll be able to change our color to anything we want. So now if I should click on edit, our value 2 as my initial value, and then I can maybe like write anything and change the color to anything I want. So now let's see what we have. Okay, and since we've gotten a way to treat the events here, so we can change the color and then anything we want to do. So basically if I should click on edit, I'll have the hello world, but because the color I represented was a direct text and not RGB, so it takes it as a null value or undefined, so basically it returns back to black. So but if I should edit it now and then I make changes, it will make changes here automatically and store the color in RGB formats. So now let's see how we can edit our array now. So if I should click on edit, I will have them change to the value of this guy here. So now let's say there is an event that fires the edit, so I can call the event here and say on click save edit. So I can call the function name to be save edit and come here and call the function save edit now. So now what will save edit do? We want to find a way to maybe like say anything we change here now, maybe like we don't want it to be hello 3, we want to be hello school 3. So and then want to change the color to anything we want, so to maybe like this or something. So if I should click on add to do, it should change the hello 3 to hello school 3. So now how do we do this? So this is where we come about changing a particular value in an array. So in JavaScript we make use of array.splice, but here it is quite different. So as we know that if we want to change the value for this list, we call on set list, right? So I'll call on set list and then I can pass in the parameter to get all the values inside that set list. So I can say maybe like previous now, and so what I want to do now is to map out everything inside previous. So I can say previous.map. So as we said earlier that previous takes in 3 outputs, the index and then the array, right? So since we've gotten a way to maybe like map out all the values inside list, so there should be a way for us to maybe like edit it. So if I should try to log all the outputs that I got now, so let's see what we'll get. If I should log out all the outputs, they actually logged to the console, but the app crashed. And the reason is because, as I said earlier, the set list expects a return statement, so which means it expects something that, okay, since you don't want the value of this variable to be this, then you will need to provide something else for it to change to. And then since we didn't provide anything for it to change it to, we just try to map out all the values in it, it will return back undefined. So how do we return back all the values? So for example, now if I want to return back all the values without me having any problem, I'll mix of return statements and then return back the output back to the array. So if I should return the output, and I can actually log anything I want, so maybe like log the output, and then I don't want the app to crash anymore. If I should click on add to do, it will log the output for me, and then the values are still there because I'm returning back the value to the set list. So now that's not what we want to get, and that's not what we want to achieve. So we want to maybe like check out the ID of the particular thing we are looking for. So now let's say we want to log output.id, and then let's see what we have. So we got back all the ID for each of the array of each of the objects inside the array. So now we want to track down a way to get the particular ID that we want to edit, and then since you know that we've binded this edit ID, we've set the edit ID here to be the obj.id, that immediately when you click on edit, the edit ID should become this obj.id. So you can actually say whenever you click on edit now, so by default the input becomes the input of the particular array you click on, the particular object you click on, the color will become it, and then the ID will become the value we stored as edit ID. So now if I want to maybe like make changes and then do anything we want, so since we've saved the ID to be to inside our edit ID now, I can actually come back and say if my output dot id is equal to id. So that's the only time you should log out the id, else it should just return, or maybe like no, not even else. If the id is equal to id, then consider log the id. So for example, now if I should add to do now, okay, so if I should edit and then I add my to do, it says id is not defined. Okay, so the name variable is edit id, sorry. So instead of using id, I'll use edit id. Okay, so if I should edit now and then add to do, I will have that id that I got. So I can use this id to track down everything, and then if I should consider log the output, not even output.id, I will have the object back. So I have this now. So now let's say since we've gotten a way to maybe like locate what we want, and then we've gotten a way to return back the value of this, so what we actually need to do is very, very simple. We make use of return. So instead of returning the output the way it was, we'll return the maybe like the edited value. So for example, you know, I mentioned something about spread operator, whereby you can get all the values inside your array or your objects. So I can set dot output now, so which means all the outputs, all the values inside my output. So which means basically I'm trying to call maybe for example these things alone and removing the objects around them. So if I call on this, I'm trying to say I want everything inside the output, not the object but everything inside it, comma. You can now set another value to maybe like the color now to be edit color, and then we can say comma the text to be what, edit name. So, and the reason is because if you notice that this output now, it will collect everything that is here, for example now. So it is still basically meaning that I copied everything here and I'm putting it here. So we have id, color, text, but you wonder that we already have object of color, and then we already have object of text. So the way object works is that if you have a value before and then you assign the value again, it will override that first value as the new value. So for example, now I add text now, and then if I should go back, it says it will check first of all the ID. Okay, it checks the color, it checks the text, then it checks the color again. Then to notice that there is a particular properties that has the name color, then it will remove this away and remain the only color. So which means it will replace the initial value. Then it will check again for the text, and then it will remove this, remove the text object, and then it will retain the ID, the new color, and then the new text. So that's basically how object works. So the override, the last property overrides the initial, or maybe like the first property. So now since we have this, so for example, now if I should try to maybe like override it again, I can still say my color to maybe like anything. So it will remove this, and then retain only this. So that's how object works. So I'm not saying my dot dot dot, instead of calling on everything like this, I'll just do the dot 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 outputs to get everything inside my output back, then comma color, comma the text, everything. So now let's see if our edit works or not. So for example, if I want to edit hello world 4, so once I click on it, it changes the value of the input to hello world 4. I can say hello, it is working. So and then I can change the color to maybe like something. If I should add to do, did you see it change? So which means we have replaced the value of an array, of a value in an array. So for example, now if I want to edit this, I'll click on this also, then the value will become this. You can say hello school 2, so you can change it to this, and then once you click on add to do, it will change the value of it. So that's how you can edit an array in React. So third one is, how do you delete an array? So deleting an array is same as, it has the same step as editing an array in React. So for example, now if I say const edit delete array to be this, so and then basically I need the ID to track down the particular value that we want to change, that we want to delete. So I can pass in my own click event handler, like when I click on it, I want it to delete this particular value from the variable. So I can say delete, let me call it delete to do. So and then I'll change this to delete to do. So then I'll have to pass in my ID the same way I did for edit to do. So I'll come back here and then pass in my ID, which is what output.id, and then since we've gotten a way to get our ID, we can pass in the parameter here and say the ID. So if I should try to log my ID, I will find the ID that I passed as parameter from that particular input. So if I should click on delete button now, let's see what I get. So I got the ID. So this allows us to maybe like track down the particular object ID that we want to delete. So since I got the ID now, I can actually do this same thing that I did here to return the current output. So if I should copy and paste this, so I can say my output.id to be equal to, I can call on ID directly since I don't have to pass it inside any variable or anything. So if I should say my output.id is equal to ID, so instead of me returning anything back, I don't want to return anything, right? Or basically I can say where output.id is not equal to ID, then that's the only time I want you to return output. So basically what I mean here is that the mapping will check for maybe like, okay, this particular ID is not equal to this ID, it will return it back. Okay, this particular ID is not equal to this ID, it will return that one too. Then by the time it's noticed that this particular ID is equal to the ID we are trying to maybe like check here, it will not return it, and then it will move on to the next one. So for example, now if I should click on delete, okay, so we got an error that we reading color and stuffs. So the reason why we got this error is because instead of it returning an object, and we called on maybe like the output.id, the output.color here in our HTML rendering, so it says undefined, so which means instead of returning a particular object or value, it's returned back undefined. Since we are not returning anything for that particular ID, so the array crashed. So for example, now see this, if I should make use of useEffect and then I try to maybe like check what is inside that array after deleting it, so I can pass in my delete to do, as I said earlier, that you can pass in the value you want to maybe like check if it changes inside your dependencies in useEffect. So if I should try to maybe like log delete array, delete to do, list now. So if I should try to maybe like log the list, let's see what I will have. So for example, now if I should click on delete, so okay, if I should click on delete now, I got an error that says cannot read undefined. So another thing I want you to notice in JavaScript for you to bypass error or for error handling is making use of question mark dots. So what question mark dots is that it skips any undefined or null value. So for example, now we are trying to say background output the color, but for that particular object there is no dot color, so it will definitely crash. So I can use my question mark dot to skip that current part. So I can say question mark dot, so which means it is only when the values are valid that is when it should return back, that is when it should maybe like display or do what we want to do. So if I should add my colon dots here, and then what do I mean by valid values? So for example, now I can have so many values. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by valid values. So valid values are values like true, maybe like string, array, objects and stuffs. And invalid values, all these are basically true values, so which means they are true. So invalid values are, for example, false, undefined, null, empty string, and so many others. So these undefined or null and false and everything, they are false value or invalid values. So definitely, since we are trying to maybe like call invalid values here, it will crash. But if you make use of question mark dots, it will skip it without the application crashing. So for example, now let's try to edit. So can you see now we got this without it crashing? So but the problem is that if we should check on our array now, it's made the index of 0 to be undefined, so this is more like partly what we want, that we wanted to delete that current object, but instead of it removing it from the array, it's turned it to undefined. So for example, now if I should try to maybe like delete this one too, so okay, so I even got an error saying reading ID, so I have to check in 72 now for error handling. Okay, so we have to use question mark dots for us to prevent error. So if I should delete this and I delete this, I delete this also, they are deleting honestly, but the problem is that they are returning all the undefined, and this undefined are still counted as part of variables values, as part of the array values. So undefined is an array value, undefined here also is an array value. If you check here also, undefined here is an array value, undefined here is also an array value, instead of them to maybe like remove it permanently. So this is more like natural because we are trying to return undefined value instead of returning back a particular output. So how do we undo this and remove all the undefineds from the current array list? So we come back here and make use of our filter. So we can say set list, and then we can represent all the values that come back with a particular name, as we said earlier. So you can say then I can mix the filter to filter out all the undefined and null. So I can say prev.filter. So what do I want to do with the filter? I can maybe like represent each values as item or something. So let me say I have item, and then what do I want to do? So what I want to do now is basically to remove all undefined, and I will say where item is item. So what I mean by this is that if you write basically only this now, it means you are trying to check for valid values. And you know, I talked about valid values, that they are more like a value that has something inside them. For example, true, string, array, object, and many things like that. So but false values are maybe like undefined, null, zero, empty string, empty object, and so many and so forth like that. So what I'm trying to do now is that, okay, if I want to filter the array that has a valid values, so basically you don't have to write where item is equal to undefined or item is equal to null or item okay is not equal to false. So now let's say it's not equal to false, or and so on and so forth. So all these things now, it means where item is not equal to undefined, where item is not equal to no, is not equal to none, and then where item is not equal to false. So instead of rewriting this long thing, you can just say where item is item. So which means you're only checking for valid values. So JavaScript automatically check for valid values and then return them back. So for example, now if I should say where item is equal to item, so if I should delete this now, it will filter everything that belongs to undefined, null, false, or anything like that. So basically that is how you can maybe like filter your array. And then if you can do all this, basically there's nothing you can't do with array in React. So for example, I can delete this and then it's gone. It's to filter the undefined and null, and then I can edit, I can do this and so many things. So this helps you in trying to maybe like work with array in React. I hope this video helped you, and thank you a lot for your time.